Welcome to CAE Pilot Podcast, a podcast that brings together aviation professionals to discuss life as a pilot, training, and career advice. You can find us at cae.com/CAE Pilot-podcast or subscribe to our show on your audio podcasting platform of choice. You can also find our video podcast on our YouTube channel.
Welcome to this episode of the CAE Pilot Podcast. We all know that the pandemic has had a major impact on the aviation industry, but for many, it hasn't killed the dream of flying. And many people are still thinking, and should be thinking, about going into the industry. Before you get to do that, though, there are a number of steps you have to take to get accepted at a school like CAE. And there are a number of assessments you have to do. And to tell us about one of those assessments, and maybe to give us a few tips and tricks, is Emma Akhurst, the lead ADAPT Psychologist at Symbiotics. Welcome to the podcast, Emma.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You know, it sounds like it's hanging over us, the assessment. Tell us a little bit about what Symbiotics does.
Absolutely. So Symbiotics are a privately owned UK company. So we specialize in assessment and selection, so particularly of individuals who are hoping to go and work within those high risk or stressful situations. So we are a global assessment provider. So looking at our data sort of pre-COVID, the data showed that there was somebody taking an ADAPT test somewhere in the world 24 hours a day. So we really have a lot of assessments running quite frequently. We specialize particularly within the aviation industry. So we work across commercial aviation, so airlines, training organizations. We also work with air forces and business jet operators. We've also worked within the blue light industry as well. So looking at assessments and selection for people working or hoping to go into armed response or royalty and specialist protection officers before they start their training as well.
So all types of jobs that really require, that have this stressful piece to them.
Absolutely.
What's the advantage for the training organization to have these assessments in place?
Well, for the training organization, it really makes sure that the individuals, the cadets that they've got coming through the training are going to have the skills to be able to support them through that particular training. So, all training organizations might differ slightly. So even though the training content itself might be largely the same, the style of training or the way that training is delivered or the location, the culture and things like that might differ. So it's really useful for that training organization to make sure that they're going to have the right cadets that are coming through, so they know they're going to have the sort of the skills to be able to get them through that training.
It's not just the ATO that benefits from this kind of assessment, right? Like there must be a positive point here for the cadets as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, for cadets, it's a huge investment as well, both, financially, obviously, but, time as well as, this could be a dream career for people. It's really beneficial for the cadets to make sure that they're going to have the ability, the sort of the skills and aptitude to be able to be successful during training as well, so that they can make sure that it is going to be that it's the right career choice for them, and they're going to be able to not only get through training but also then hopefully find that dream career once they finish through training as well.
So it sounds like your role is really to set everybody up for success. Yeah,
that's it. It can, it can feel really challenging if you're knowing that you've got an assessment process to go through before you can start on this training. But it's really beneficial for both the ATO and the cadet to make sure that it's really a right match, so they can sort of support each other through that training process.
And the test that you use at CAE is called ADAPT, and that's the first step in the selection process. Can you tell us a little bit about the ADAPT test, how it was developed, and what purposes it serves?
Yeah. So ADAPT. So what ADAPT is it's our online assessment platform that delivers the psychometric aptitude and knowledge tests to the candidates. So depending on the assessment process, the combination of tests can vary. So for example, For the cadet assessments that we're talking about, this might usually involve the personality questionnaire, a maths, physics, and cognitive reasoning assessment, the FAST test, and our ball game and fixed wing. But this can differ depending on the training organisation, or obviously to help adapt to some of the remote testing that the majority of organisations have had to move to as well. And then, as I mentioned, with it not just being the cadet assessments, there's sort of a range of solutions out there. So whatever the role requirements, whether that be sort of a command upgrade assessment, cabin crew, the tests within that, the sort of the battery can vary to make up the right assessment program.
So the first one that you're talking about here is sort of the personality questionnaire. And my first thing is like, wow, okay, it's a bit dating site kind of a thing. But tell us what you're looking for, or, what does this personality test, what's it going to tell you?
So the personality questionnaire, the sort of the idea, or sort of the benefits of having a personality questionnaire is what builds on, what is personality. So without going into too much information or depth on that, personality largely sort of underpins a lot of our preferences, our attributes, our sort of behaviors. And all of that can really help determine how well we're going to fit into a particular role. So what the personality assessment allows us to sort of understand is what those individual characteristics are, and then that can help determine how suitable somebody might be for a particular role. So they're really normally used alongside different aptitude-based tests, different coordination type tests. So whereas the aptitude-based test might say, can this individual meet the standards here? Are they going to be able to get through training? The personality side of things might try and assess, are they the right person to? So are they going to be the best fit for this particular training organisation?
Can someone prepare for a test like that?
You can prepare in terms of familiarising yourself with what a personality questionnaire might be. You can, there's lots of opportunities to perhaps try and, sort of complete different personality questionnaires to try and get you familiar a little bit more with the concept of what a questionnaire might be or what might involve. But there are lots of different questionnaires out there. Our personality questionnaire is it's a really complex, sort of comprehensive tool with sort of a particular focus on some aviation, relevant characteristics and things like that. Whereas, not all personality questionnaires will have that sort of focus. So there are lots available, and you can sort of, familiarise yourself with what that's going to involve. But really the best tip for completing a personality questionnaire is to try and be yourself, try and be, as relaxed and as open, as sort of honest as you can be. It's not about trying to sort of, the personality questionnaire isn't there to try and trick somebody. It's to understand a little bit more about that person, because there isn't a sort of a right or a wrong personality. It's sort of just about understanding that person a little bit more.
I always find it amazing that when you take these tests, and I think of like the Myers Briggs as an example, and of taking it several times, and you always get the same answer. And I'd love to be like behind the scenes to understand how exactly that happens. But I don't want you to give your trade secrets away either.
Well, I mean, not to go into trade secrets, but that's really because personality is generally quite stable over time. It's not, people don't tend to just sort of wake up one day and change their personality. It remains generally quite stable across time. There might be some few, sort of amendments or adjustments, but really the sort of the core personality is really stable, and it's more our behavior that sort of changes. And that's why doing a personality questionnaire sort of helps understand what those sort of, those characteristics are. And then you can understand where perhaps, somebody might have a little bit further, they might need a little bit more training to meet some requirements, or where they're sort of perhaps more of an ideal fit already.
And does someone come in and do these? I guess they're online now. No, they are online. So when you do these, do you do them all in a row? Like, do you do sort of the personality, the progressive physics, mathematics, the cognitive reasoning, and the FAST? Do you do them all at once?
A candidate doesn't have to do them all at once. So obviously before COVID, things were perhaps a little bit different. So an individual might have completed the personality questionnaire when they were at home. Really we try and get them to do that so that they can make sure that they're they're perhaps in an environment that's a little bit more comfortable for them, a little bit more familiar, so they can sort of complete it in their own time. And then they might come into the assessment centre and complete the remaining tests. But with a lot of the assessments now being done remotely, all of them will perhaps be completed at home, but they don't have to be done sort of one after the other. An individual can have a little bit of a break or a breather in between, so they're not just staring at a screen for too long trying to fill out different questionnaires and tests.
And how do you, we said that you can't prepare obviously for the personality one. I would imagine for the physics and mathematics, you have to sort of know your stuff. What do you suggest? What are your tips for people who are, going in for these assessments in terms of preparation, maybe less studying, more how to be well, I guess, for this kind of assessment?
Yeah, so really preparation is quite key. So trying to find out, what to expect. So that could be trying to understand what the different tests or questionnaires are that they're going to complete. So what is the assessment going to involve? I know CAE in particular as well do, or some of the different schools send out information to the candidates or the cadets. So, taking the time to read through the information that you've been given, read through the information that's available. Especially with remote assessments now, it's also trying to make sure that just because you're completing these tests or questionnaires at home, you're still seeing it as though it's an assessment. So try and make sure that the environment that you're doing them in is still going to be sort of conducive for being able to complete them to, the best ability that you're going to be able to be as well.
And then we get into the part that I would do terribly at, the progressive math and physics. Now, obviously, everybody knows that these are essential in aviation. Are these geared towards aviation, or are they general?
So it's a little bit of both. So particularly because the sort of the level that the assessment's being done at, the cadets aren't necessarily going to have specific aviation knowledge. So the general maths and physics questions might have aviation related topics in them. So they might involve things like speed, distance, time, bearings, things like that. So whilst you won't be expected to have a, sort of an aviation technical understanding, there might be some formulas or things like that have a sort of an aviation relation to them, to sort of understand, how well you're going to be able to pick up on some of the topics that you might experience in ground school.
And I imagine these are graded much like a high school or university exam.
Absolutely. So it's, it's not like the personality questionnaire here. When you do the maths and physics, there definitely are right and wrong answers. So these ones are typically, they'll have a time association to them. And then it will be, the candidate will have a sort of a percentage of how many they've got right, how many they've completed, perhaps how long they've taken to complete them as well.
And then we move on to cognitive reasoning. So what's that? What's the objective of that? How do we prepare?
So the sort of looking at cognitive ability, so that's really sort of defined as a general mental capability which involves reasoning, problem solving, planning, those sorts of things. And it's a really good indicator of how an individual deals with and processes information. So that's why it's generally included in a lot of our test batteries, because it's quite a good overview of sort of general performance. So the cognitive reasoning can look at a variety of elements. So it might look at numerical reasoning, it might look at working memory or spatial relationship reasoning. And as with the other tests, sort of maths and physics, preparation and sort of practice can be really useful here. Familiarizing yourself with some of the topics that you get. We're asked quite frequently, how can I prepare? How can I sort of, get myself ready? So that's why we launched our e-commerce website. So we offer sort of an opportunity for an individual to practice their skills and their knowledge. So just to help familiarize yourself with, what's the test format going to look like? How do I answer a question? Just to take away that initial anxiety of what the assessment might look like.
And I think that's an important point that you bring up, because, the taking a test is as much about having the skills to take the test as it is the knowledge to pass the test. So anybody who's done like an SAT or whatever it might be, understanding what the test is and how to take it is a huge piece of it.
Yeah, that's it. You want to make sure that you've got as much information as you can have before going into the assessment, so that you understand perhaps, what the format's going to look like, and that can sort of help just take away that initial anxiety of what's this going to involve straight away, as well as having the sort of the knowledge and the sort of, revising the topic areas as well. And then you can put all of that together and make sure that you can, the first performance is your sort of best performance as it can be.
So the last piece of the battery of assessments is the FAST test, and this is to test multitasking. And is multitasking really something that's important for a pilot?
Yes, absolutely. There's, so many different tasks that really require your attention, and you need to be able to deal with these effectively, to prioritize them appropriately. So, for example, you'll have the controls in the flight deck that you need to be able to understand, to know what you need to be able to do with them. You might have information coming in from ATC. You'll need to be maintaining that communication with all of the flight deck crew, processing any visual information that you've got going on as well. So there's a lot that a pilot will need to be dealing with. So having FAST as an assessment that looks at sort of, replicating that perhaps demanding work environment that are experienced by pilots can help understand how an individual might be dealing with, multitasking.
So can you give us maybe a little example of what kind of a question that exam would have?
Yeah. So FAST itself is not just a multitasking test. So it is quite a challenging test. It's designed to be that way, to sort of put an individual through their paces a little bit there. It's perhaps a little bit more interactive than the maths and physics tests that we've spoken about. So it presents a sort of a multitasking environment, which will require the individual to use their psychomotor skills whilst answering a series of reasoning questions and be aware of an ongoing situation. So it's not like any of our other tests. The screen is sort of split into different quadrants. So, sort of in the left-hand side, there's a small aircraft that they'll need to be aware of. They'll need to avoid things that are coming into their path there. On the right-hand side, you've got cognitive reasoning questions that they'll need to be answering as well. And then in front, there'll be a visual field as well as the flight deck information as well they have to deal with as well. So this whole screen will be filled with lots of different information. The candidate will need to be keeping aware of all the different areas and answering all the different questions that are coming up as well.
It sounds like you're describing my 12-year-old's video games. It actually sounds it sounds fun. Actually, it seems.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more enjoyable tests if you compare it to sitting down and doing a typical sort of maths test. Yeah. And
is this one that aside from, I guess you have practice tests on your site, but aside from that, what can you do to prepare for a test like this?
Yeah, so aside from sort of, getting familiar with the test itself through sort of the practice test, anything really that's going to help develop your, give you an opportunity to practice sort of multitasking. So obviously you can sort of try and practice the different elements themselves. So, practicing sort of coordination type tasks, or practicing sort of cognitive reasoning type tasks, to build on those sort of skills to help you when you have to bring them together. And any sort of event or assessment that might sort of just test your ability to have distractions coming in and to be able to deal with them can be really useful.
So of all of these assessments, what's the most common factor that leads to someone maybe not getting through to the next stage?
I think largely what we tend to see is probably under preparation. So candidates perhaps coming forward who perhaps haven't taken all of the steps that they can do to prepare themselves ahead of the assessment. So that might be through not being sure what to expect, and therefore anxiety or nerves sort of impacting them being able to show their themselves to their best of their abilities, or just under preparation in terms of not revising So not having the sort of the knowledge to be able to reach the sort of required standard at the of the test. So as I sort of said a little bit earlier, with the test at the moment being done remotely, it's still really important to treat it like an assessment, as though you were turning up to an assessment centre. So making sure that your environment is really suitable, you've not got distractions, you've got all of the equipment that you need, to make sure that you've, if you're told you need a mouse and a keyboard, make sure that works ahead of time. Just that sort of trying to check that you've got everything ready. Obviously, it is a really challenging profession. It's a competitive environment, and not everybody does pass first time. So it really isn't too uncommon not to need to retake. So it is fine if you do, if that does happen. It isn't the end of the dream if you do need to retake. So
I guess the best way then for someone to prepare for their assessment is to go to your website, symbioticsltd.com, and to do practice assessments.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the really useful ways to sort of familiarize yourself with what the test format's going to look like. Obviously, the tests and sort of the assessments that we offer via our website aren't going to be the same test that a candidate would come and do at the assessment centre. The questions will be completely different, but it really can help sort of, as I said before, take away that sort of anxiety or the novelty of what that test is going to look like, and really try and help them familiarise themselves with what the type of questions are going to look like.
And I know that at CAE we give our candidates a preparation package as well, so they'll be well prepared when they get to you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm an aspiring pilot. I have the personality. I'm got the cognitive reasoning. I can multitask, and arguably I have the personality for it. What's the next step in the assessment?
So once all of the online assessments have been completed, the next step will usually be an interview with ourselves at Symbiotics. So obviously at the moment, again, these are also being done remotely. So that might be through a platform that we can conduct that through remotely.
What do I expect from this assessment? I'm going to sit down, I guess, with someone like yourself. And
yeah.
What are you gonna ask me? What are you gonna grill me on?
We won't be grilling anybody. It's really, to get to understand a little bit more about the individual. So the interview itself is really used to, firstly get to know a little bit more about the individual. Also to sort of sound out the veracity of the outputs from the self-report questionnaires, delve further a little bit into the motivation of that individual, what is that dream, why do they want to be a pilot, some key skills as well, and perhaps a general understanding of some of the key areas. So that might involve the training or the role itself in a little bit more detail. Again, this could vary, I guess, across different flight schools or different training organizations as to what competencies are sort of most important. But generally, that will be what the interview will involve.
And can you really tell, I'm just thinking in sort of this COVID era where we're doing everything in a two-dimensional fashion, can you really tell someone's motivation for a role, or, sort of assess their attitude towards things in a remote platform like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it was a great way before to be able to do that face-to-face. But we've worked quite hard to be able to adapt that, to be able to complete it, the assessments done remotely. It's something that we have always worked with pre-COVID as well. We've always done a lot of online assessments because of the sort of global nature. There's been a lot of times where it's much easier to be able to get somebody on this sort of platform. So it's something that we're quite specialist in and sort of used to doing as well. And then doing that sort of pre-COVID, we've been able to just sort of ramp that up a little bit and adapt our process a little bit more as well. But through our, sort of the interview questions itself, the sort of the standardization and the types of interviews and questions that we do, we can really get to understand, what is sort of motivating that individual, what is their sort of understanding that they've got as well.
And on your end, you have some kind of, I guess, a checklist that you're going through or certain questions that you're going to ask to get to this, to sort of your assessment of the person?
Yeah, so we've got our sort of our framework that we use. We've got lots of indicators that we're looking for. Really, it's to help keep the process standard as well. So, whichever assessor or interviewer that the candidate has, we want to make sure as well that that's going to be a consistent experience, so that it's fair. It's every candidate's going to have the same chance, regardless of who that interviewer is or which one of our assessors that they get. So we work towards sort of the best practice of assessing, and sort of our own best practices. So to make sure that it is as fair as can be for any candidate that's coming through.
Sort of what tips do you have? Now I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my God, now I got to go find a tie. I haven't worn a tie in ages. I don't know if my jackets fit anymore. So what are the tips for this? Do I take this as a job interview, or is this an informal thing? Like what in my mind, how should I approach this?
I would say, it is tricky. It is a very different time at the moment, but we would recommend, treat it as if it is a job interview, as if you were going to leave the house and go to your assessment center or turn up, treat it that same way as well. Just because it's not face-to-face, it doesn't mean it's any less important or any less formal, particularly if this is the sort of the dream, the opportunity where you get to, to try and have that interview to make it to the next step. So just because it's at home, do try and treat it as though it was a face-to-face assessment as best as possible as well. We do obviously understand that there can be a few more challenges. Technology doesn't always play along as well as it can do in a face-to-face setting. So we do understand that there can be those challenges, and it might not always be as smooth there, but try and eliminate those as much as you can do. Check for distractions. If you've got a phone, put it on silent or keep it out of the way. If you're living with people, let them know perhaps that you're not gonna that you've got an interview.
So I guess things like being on time, being polite, being courteous, all of those things that you would have for an in-person interview apply here.
Yeah, that's it. All of those things still apply, even though it's not being done face-to-face as well. There's just a few more additional checks. It might be it will be really beneficial to check technology. Make sure your microphone, your webcam's going to work. The last thing you want to do is turn up and be really flustered minutes before you're about to start because you can't get the microphone to work or you're not sure how to turn the webcam on. So do a couple of practice runs, test it with a friend or test it with anybody, just to make sure that it's going to work. As well as all the general advice of, take a bit of time to practice, have a little think about your skills, your experiences that you've gained, think about the role itself, why it's important to you, all of those things sort of wrapped up as well. So
what other sort of more out there kind of questions would you ask?
I think some of the questions that perhaps are worth sort of people having a think about perhaps more competency-based questions where we're looking at sort of, skills and experiences. So it might be to ask about a time where, you've delivered really excellent customer service, something like that. So having a little bit of a think, spending a little bit of time thinking about, okay, what are my experiences? What have I gained? What have I done? And how can I get that across as well? Because as interviewers, we can only really assess what we're told or the information that we're given. So it might be you've got all this experience sort of, wrapped up, but unless we can see that or we have that information, we can't really do anything with it. So having a little bit of a think about, what competency questions might I be asked? How, where have I demonstrated that in my past or in experience? That can be really useful.
So it sounds like I'm preparing for a regular job interview in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's definitely it isn't an interrogation. We're not looking to sort of grill anybody there. It is to get to know a little bit more about the individual,
You've obviously completed lots of tests online, so the personality questionnaire as well. So again, that's why it's quite useful to be as honest as you can be in both of those. You don't want to be trying to second guess the personality questionnaire and then turn up at interview and then actually things don't quite match up.
Right.
So you want to just present as yourself in the most prepared way you can do.
And I think it's important that people understand that this is not an adversarial process, right? Your objective really is to find the right candidate to come to CAE.
Absolutely.
And I think that in our training as well, we're not there. I think people sometimes can get the impression, oh, well, we want to catch people out or we want to do things. That's really not, I think, certainly not CAE's role. I think we are the partner to get people flying and to train, et cetera. So I think it's a good mindset for people to go into it with, so that you're not sort of thinking it's an adversarial event right from the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's as we work alongside CAE, that's what we're there to do as well. We really do want people to do as well as they can do. We're not there to try and trick anybody or try and do anything like that. It really is to get to know a little bit more about them and make sure that they're this is the right role for them as well, that this training is going to be suitable for them, as well as making sure that CAE get the best candidates that they can have as well.
And what are the most common mistakes someone can make in the interview process?
I think quite similarly to some of the sort of online assessments, it can be that sort of preparation, because again, that's really key here, as with all the online assessments. So as I sort of touched on, making sure that you do take that time to have a think about, yourself, your experiences. Like you've said as well, like every pilot's probably thought about, why do I want to do this? But making sure that you know how you're going to explain that to somebody else as well. So just practicing practice having an interview. So whether that be with friends or family, or just practicing with yourself in a mirror. It can feel a little bit silly, but it can be really useful just to sort of get used to having that sort of conversation and explaining, why is this my dream? Why is this something that I really want to do? Sometimes perhaps it can be that people really can struggle to sort of reflect on their experiences, so they can't quite demonstrate the skills that we're looking for, that we really need to be able to see. And at the same time as well, as well as being sort of, honest and true to yourself. Again, it's not, we're not looking necessarily for that hard sell either. It is just about seeing that individual as well.
That's very cool. And then I guess from there, once if someone's passed both the assessments and then the interview, then you make a recommendation, I guess, to CAE to accept that person or not.
Yes. Yep. Then, so that sort of rounds the process off.
You work in aviation, right? Indirectly, I guess. But when did you fall in love with flying?
So I sort of did study psychology at university, and then went on to do my master's, and sort of started an internship at Symbiotics, quite sort of new and fresh to aviation. And as I was sort of just doing my internship and studying sort of the occupational side of things at university, I really just got really interested in wanting to understand more about aviation. The more I learned about, all of these things that a pilot has to deal with, or, all the challenges that they see, or the challenges of their role and the continual training, that was just really interesting for me. And wanting to sort of, keep finding out a little bit more. I did do a trial flight lesson, but didn't quite get the flying bug that lots of people do tell me about. So I'm definitely much better suited to being on the ground and finding out a little bit more down here.
And tell me about your role at Symbiotics. What's clearly you've been there right out of your studies, it sounds like. Most people think psychologist. Well, I'm I'm going to sit in an office with a beautiful leather lounge chair, and I'm going to talk to people all day. And here you are, working in this field. How did that come about?
So my role at Symbiotics is quite varied in some respects as well. So I conduct a lot of the interviews as well. So, some of the cadets listening, it might be me that turns up for the remote interview that they have to do. As psychologists, we also spend a lot of time sort of working on our test development. So a lot of the range of tests that we've got, some of those have been internally developed. So we've sort of built on those, developed those. There's obviously a lot of data that we have as well behind the tests. So one of the sort of great things about the Symbiotics and ADAPT range of tests is the amount of data that we have behind there. There's sort of tens of thousands of people that we've had complete these tests. So we sort of continually assess that data, and that's used to sort of enhance the norm groups and assessments that we have behind, and sort of the algorithms that work behind all of those tests.
So the tests evolve over time, I guess.
Yeah, so the tests might evolve, or the sort of the benchmarks that we have behind the tests. So it might be for one training organization or for one particular airline. It might be that those benchmarks of what's considered a good pass might vary, and that's something that we sort of continually do behind the scenes as well to make sure that that sort of data is as representative as it can be.
And would an event like COVID, the COVID pandemic, is it possible that would change what you're looking for, or what maybe an organization is looking for in a pilot? Would events like that maybe change the psychology of the person you're looking for?
It can do, depending on different organizations. I'm sure, if you looked at two different airlines, you might be able to see quite clearly the differences amongst those airlines, and therefore how they might be looking for different people or different types of personalities to sort of suit that organization. So big changes can impact the culture of an organization or a training organization, and that could change, as you say, the type of person that they might be looking for.
Well, Emma, I have to say this. Any cadet who ends up with you for their assessment is lucky, because we've been talking for about half an hour now, or maybe more. And honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and telling us all about what Symbiotics does and how it helps CAE find the right people. And it's good for people to have, a lot of pilots have told us, that this pandemic is causing some people to hesitate right now. Mm-hmm. But just about every pilot we have spoken to has said that their road to becoming a pilot was not a direct arrow. There was something somewhere that either got in the way or stopped them. And we've heard it over and over. And I think it's really fun in this podcast that we've had the opportunity to talk about the first steps in becoming a pilot. And it's a nice, hopeful message that, we know things will come back eventually. And it's fun to start to think about, people being able to take the first steps back into this great career in aviation. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you as well.
And I'd like to remind everybody to go to airside.aero, a ton of great resources for pilots to get back up in the air. We've got the CV builder, we've got the jobs board, lots of great articles on just about everything you can think of in a pilot's life. Emma, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
CAE Pilot Podcast is brought to you by CAE, the global leader in training for the civil aviation, defense and security, and healthcare markets. For more information, check out cae.com.